So I would really like to thank Dr. Naren for taking this time away from his busy schedule and what I understand has been very um, hectic and difficult time. So thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to give this talk and being here with us. Before I continue, let me briefly introduce Dr. Naren Rao to all of you. Um, After the completion of his MBBS and MD degree in psychiatry, Dr. Naren went on to do both his junior residency and senior residency in the Department of Psychiatry at the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, NIMHANS, Bangalore. He also went on to do a postdoctoral fellowship at the Research Imaging Center, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health at Toronto in Canada. He is professionally a member of the Indian Psychiatric Society and a supported member of the International Society for Bipolar Disorders. Reviewer for several prestigious manuscripts, such as the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disorders, Comprehensive Psychiatry, Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Mental Health, and several others. His areas of interest include schizophrenia, obsessive compulsive disorders, magnetic resonance imaging, and neurocognitive assessments. He has received several awards and honors, and one of them include the NARSAD Young Investigator Award given by the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation of the USA. There are several others. All you need to do is to Google him to go through his enormous list of publications, both in peer-reviewed as well as press, peer-reviewed journals as well as in the press, conference proceedings, and several others. So with this brief introduction, I will hand it over to Dr. Naren. Thank you once again, sir, for being here, and I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Dr. Pushya, for the kind words. At the outset, I thank Dr. Sangeeta Menon and NIAS for inviting me to this interesting course. I also apologize due to unavoidable circumstances. I was not able to take the previous lecture 2 weeks back. So I will try to do what Indian specialists in doing. I'll try to do a jugad of combining both lectures into one. So I thought of doing some part of the last lecture because it's a continuation of both lectures. So the boundaries of reality and phenomenology in therapy. Okay. So if you have any questions, we will take up at the end, or maybe in between. If you have anything, put it in the chat box. I can answer them when I pause in between the lecture. I will share the screen. Okay. Yeah, is it visible, the screen?
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I will speak for 45 to 60 minutes, and then we will have another 30 minutes for questions and answers. So the topic given to me was not pure medical science. So it's boundaries of reality and phenomenology in therapy. So many of you may be wondering what a doctor is doing in speaking philosophical topics. So we will just go through some of it, and then let me bring some of the neuroscience or the medical aspects into some of these philosophical questions. Okay. So before we get into boundaries of reality, the first question is, what is reality? Okay. And if you Google, you get this from the most authentic source on the internet, our own Wikipedia. Okay. So from this definition, let me break it down. Okay, to make it a little more simpler, and then we see that still the definition says reality is not imaginary, but it is a little more than that. Okay, so this is the breakup of a definition that I would like to keep it for today. Okay, so the first part is reality is everything that appears to our five senses. So this was one of the earliest definition which people were following. What is to try to answer what is reality. Few people also say that reality is what appears to a sufficiently large group of people. Okay, we'll come to that why people have given these different definitions. Reality is that which, if you stop believing in it, does not go away. Okay, that is, it is not just an imagination. So, which is the definition which you saw in the previous slide. Reality is also defined as by some people as a world without us. That is a world untouched by human desires and intentions. That is description of something as it is without the influence of the human touch. Okay. So let us look at each of these definitions to see whether the definitions are apt, whether the definitions are comprehensive, whether they are they cover what they are supposed to cover. Okay. So this is the commonest definition when we discuss what is reality. Okay. So what is reality is everything that appears to our five senses. Okay. But when we discuss what appears to our senses, we all think that it is in the form of sensation. Okay. But what we actually do or what we actually feel is not just a sensation, but it is a perception. Okay. So what's the difference between sensation and perception? Let me show you a couple of images, okay, and try to explain the difference between the two. Okay. So you have an hourglass here. Okay. So few people may see the black shade and then consider this to be an hourglass or part of an hourglass, but the others may also see the white only and then see that it is two individual or two faces which are facing each other. Okay. In the same way, there is another image. Few of you may see that as a beautiful girl. Some of you may see that it's a old man who is actually smoking or who is blowing a trumpet. Okay. So what you see as a sensation, okay, what you see from your eyes, okay, is nothing but a color or difference between the two. Okay. There is a black and white in this image, also the black and white in this image. So your sensation or the retina just takes the light from the external environment, and then it is not just sensed as it is, because you are giving a meaning out of this whole picture. Okay, so you are not seeing individual aspect as separate, you are not seeing just black and white as color. Okay, so that's the reason that you are able to make, even though this the eye of the girl is distinctly separate from rest, you will be able to make a silhouette in which you will be able to see this as a face of a beautiful girl. Okay. So your brain actually modifies it in such a way that it actually tries to give meaning without you putting any effort. So it is not a conscious effort, it is not a planned effort that you see a face here. Okay, so it happens automatically. Okay, so what happens to your sensory information so that it becomes meaningful is called perception. Okay, so the sensation is same for every individual, but the perception differs from individual to individual. Okay. So as you all may see, the first instance, some of you might have seen this as an old man, some of you might have seen this as a young woman. Okay. So what you see actually depends not only about the intensity of the picture, but also about your own experiences, current mood state, and what gender you may be. Okay, what is the life experience that you are currently undergoing. Okay, so the perception is influenced by several other factors other than just what is present in the external world. Okay, so it is an interaction between the external world and the internal world, and then it produces, but the whole process happens automatically that you are not even aware. Okay, so to make it more clear, let me show you one more picture. Okay, so on the left side you see two triangles. Okay, so the first triangle which is broken from the in the white line. The second triangle you are able to see which is held by the three Pokemons. Okay, so this is something called as Kanizha triangle. Okay, I'm sure most of you or all of you will be seeing that the triangle, which is the inverted triangle, is actually more darker than the background. So it is on the top of your white triangle. Okay, so it is inverted, but it is more darker than the background. But in fact, if you look at the intensity of that objectively using any measurement, Okay, so if you take a machine and then measure the black intensity of the black in this triangle versus the background, the intensity is the same. Okay, so just because I have put three Pokemons, your eyes will automatically see that this triangle which is superimposed on the white triangle is darker than the background. So your mind is trying to give a meaning so that it is actually creating an illusion. Automatically it is creating an illusion. Okay, so that no matter how hard you try, you will not be able to see the inverted triangle as the same black as the background. Okay, so it is not in your volitional control that you see them as the same. Okay, to do that, what you need to do is you need to change the angle of the Pokemon, what I have done in the right side of the figure. Okay, so you will still see some of this as dark because you have already seen the previous picture. Your mind is still trying to construct meaning out of it. But if you focus on the edges or the angle of the triangle, you will see that the intensity has become same as the background. That's why you will not be able to see any edge which is distinct. Okay, so it brings upon the question, does our sense give accurate picture of the world? Okay, so whatever if we think as what is sensed by our sense organ is the reality. Okay, so our sense organs actually don't give accurate picture of the external world. Okay, so one more well demonstrated visual perception is what we call as binocular vision. Okay, so this is something which some of you might have done when you're a kid or in your adolescence, that you cover one eye with a opaque, maybe a paper roll or something. Okay, and then keep your other eye. Okay, so what you see is you don't see a brick and the hand separate. You actually see that your hand has a hole and you can see the brick through that. Okay, and in a similar exercise, if we give two separate stimuli here, okay, so as you could see the rivalry stimuli, you give a separate stimulus to your left eye, give a separate stimulus to your right eye, but what the individual sees is actually a meaningful face of the chimpanzee and the text. Okay, so this is a proven experiment in which you give two different stimuli. The person need not have to put any effort, but they will be able to see and decipher that there is a meaningful picture and a meaningful text. Okay, so that is because our brain is reconstructing whatever is sensed by the sense organ. Okay, so if we stick to that original definition, that is reality, everything that appears to our five senses, then we very well know that sensation is not accurate and sense organs do not work in isolation. So if the sensation to perception is not a conscious volitional process, okay, then is the sense organ capable of giving a real picture or is capable of informing us the reality? Okay, so this is something similar to the common saying that your eyes will see what your mind wants to see. Okay, so because we may never see things as they are, because we always experience things, we just don't see something in isolation. We always mix that up so that it is a conscious experience to us. Okay, so some people went to the next step that okay, an individual may be having difficulty or error in accurate description, but a group of people together cannot have. Okay, so then came the definition of what appears to a sufficiently large group of people, that is reality. Okay, so this is also something which was commonly used to call something as real, unreal, moral, immoral. Okay, so most of the religious or the political arrangements in several centuries have taken the form mainly because what appears to a sufficiently large group of people was considered as truth or the accurate description of the reality. Okay, but we very well know that a single person may actually be right. Okay, and a group of people could be wrong. Not that the group of people are innocent, ignorant. Okay, it may be just that the point of view may be very different. Okay, so it primarily depends upon where you stand. Okay, so a group of people may see the same number as 6, whereas an individual may see it as 9, and from their point of view, both are correct. So there may not be a single truth or a single reality. So this again brings into the question, it is not only the individual who is, or whatever is the external stimulus that is important, but also the context in which the individual is seeing, that is also important to get a description of the reality. Okay. Description of reality as an accurate description by a large group of people doesn't hold good. Okay. So then the commonest layman description of reality is that which, if you stop believing in it, does not go away. Whereas our imagination, okay, is something that will go away if you stop believing in that. Okay. So I imagine that I want to see I want to recollect a Bollywood movie that I saw yesterday. Okay, so I am able to do that volitionally. But then the moment I stop recollecting that, it ceases to exist. It's not that it is going to remain. Okay. On the other hand, this computer screen is still present. Okay, so whether I consider this to be present or absent. Okay, so it's not in my will that this external computer screen is present. Okay, so this seemed like a more relevant or a near close description of reality to a majority. Okay, because this looks and appeals to our common sense that okay, if it is real, it is going to be there regardless of what I think about that. Okay, but in clinical experience, we do see several conditions. One of the most important being schizophrenia, in which we see situations in which people do experience real, at least real to them, okay, a sensory experience which does not go away if they just stop believing in it. Okay, so I hope some of you have seen this movie called Beautiful Mind. Okay, so this is a description and
the guy tries to wander into the library, but he doesn't have ID. Why can't people read their numbers?
So I will just show the clip which shows the hero of the movie, John Nash, who later won the Nobel Prize, experiencing visual and auditory hallucinations. Okay, so the person is actually seeing, hearing to another human being, okay, as real as any other individual, but at the same time, rest of the people are not able to see. Okay, so just see this 1 minute clip. Okay, so in which John Nash is seeing one of his persecutor, that is whom he believes as his supervisor in the military or intelligence, but it is completely his hallucination.
And then he goes totally nuts.
Is this what you are, soldier? Some useless fool? A local madman? No, soldier. You're gonna end up in a cell. Old, worthless, discarded. There's no mission. The money, rocking, drool. The world will burn to ashes. You are not real. You are not real. You're still talking.
So the actor actually says that you are not real. Okay, but still he cannot stop seeing him. Okay, so it is same like what you all experienced a while ago, in which there was a Canizza triangle. So even though I told that the intensity is the same, it was not that you were able to experience it differently. Okay, so many times our experience is not continuously under our will.
This guy tries.
Okay, so the hallucinations gives an excellent example for how reality could be very subjective. So it need not be the same for every individual, because many of the perceptions and the sensory experiences that we have could be very individualistic, not only in the meaning that they give, but also absolute sensation that they give. Okay. So for example, hallucinations occur in external space, that is, I'm able to see. It's not like imagination which happens in my subjective space or in my mind. Okay. They're clearly delineated, elements are full and fresh, they're constant and remain unaltered. I'm not able to discard them out of my will. So for example, here he is shouting again and again that you are not real, but still he is not able to stop seeing him or stop listening to him. Okay, fine. So this again shows that the definition that we consider are commonly considered that it is something that is not part of your imagination. Okay, may not serve our purpose to get an accurate definition of reality. So this is a more comprehensive definition of reality, which few people have proposed. It's a world without us, a world untouched by human desires and intentions. Okay. So this traditionally has the backing from maybe Descartes' dualism, in which there is a materialistic world and then there is a mental world. Okay. So what I am experiencing is very different from the external world. Okay, so what I see, what I do has nothing to do with the absolute nature of the external world. Okay, so the world untouched by human desires and intentions, or in other words, which doesn't depend upon the human conscious experience, is what is considered as the reality, or the pure description of the reality by majority. But in the last century, there have been several new insights, okay, which have shown that you cannot remove I from the reality. In other words, you cannot remove a conscious experience from the reality. Okay, so if the quantum theory of physics has shown that one cannot separate the observation from the observer. Okay, so I'm not an expert in quantum, but the nutshell is that the conscious observation of something may interfere with the materialistic world and may actually determine its evolution as well. Okay, so it's not that these two worlds don't interact with each other. Okay, like Descartes thought that there is a materialistic world and then there is a mental world, which don't interact with each other. They are completely separate. Okay, it's actually the interaction between the two may bring about the absolute reality. Okay. So the quantum mechanics initially thought, regardless of what is the observation, okay, observer. So it could be the observer could be a machine, the observer could be a chemical compound, whatever it is, it may still result in change of the physical world. Okay, but if you keep extending that observer chain, okay, so this, which is called the von Neumann chain, okay, so at the end of the chain it comes and ends at the conscious observation. Okay, so the consciousness may actually stay at the top of the pyramid, and then it may all the observations may go there. Okay, so for example, you may be observing a light particle becoming a wave, which is the most common description of reality experiments in quantum mechanics. Okay, that you may have an apparatus for that which transfers photons. Okay, and then you may see a wave picture on the retina. Okay, but your retina, till your retina, everything may still be part of the observation. Okay, so though you may consider apparatus as the observer, okay, because there is a system which is observing that. If you look at from the point of retina, you are actually looking at the apparatus. So the apparatus also becomes part of the experiment, that is part of the observation. So several authors have proposed that it is the consciousness of an observer which is the demarcation line that precipitates collapse of the wave function, which is the basics of quantum mechanics, independent of any realist interpretation. So this has led many people to claim that if you want to have an accurate description of the reality, okay, so then you need to have an accurate understanding of the conscious experience. So this is where the boundaries between the materialistic world, or what we may consider as the realistic world, and the boundary of the conscious experience of the mental world may actually get blurred. So the several disciplines have been trying to examine how this interaction happens. Okay, so the age-old, and most of you are the students of philosophy, so I don't have to get into that. But in the last few decades, other disciplines also have jumped into the foray to examine the conscious experience, from the social psychology, cognitive neuroscience, and the branch from which I come, the medical science or the psychiatry. So why we need so many people? Okay, what if it is so fundamental? Why is it so difficult to understand this interaction between the conscious experience and the external world? Okay, so the problem lies in the nature of our conscious experience. Okay, so all along we have been discussing what is reality from an external perspective, not from our inner world perspective. Okay, so none of us question that whether what I am thinking, okay, is it real or not, whether my existence is real or not. Okay, so mind doubts about everything else, but does not doubt about its own self. Okay, so we have something like a transparency to our own doubt about the mind. Okay, so this is the famous Descartes statement, which led him to do the dualistic theory. Okay, but same like our external world experience, our inner world experience, in other words, our experience of our own self is also not very accurate. But at the same time, it is so fundamental to our human experience that we hardly ever think about the accuracy of the same. Okay, so we rarely self-doubt. Okay, only in situations under stress, or when we are depressed, or when we are taking a major decision, we may have some self-doubt. Otherwise, we don't doubt about our own self. Okay, that is at the cognitive level in decision making. But at the same time, we never doubt that is it me who is making this decision. Okay, so is it me who is doing this action? Is it me who is experiencing this experience? Okay, so we never doubt about our own self. So to understand the better nature of self, we actually need to see abnormality. Okay, so the presence of it is felt when it is inaccurate. So let me show you some clinical examples. So some of the assumptions that we make, okay, that is because it happens automatically, okay, is we are the same person across time. Okay, so we don't doubt that, okay, have I changed compared to yesterday? Okay, every day when I get up, we don't see that, okay, am I still remaining Naren or have I transformed into something else? Okay, because we all believe that we are the same person across time. Okay, we also believe that we are the authors of our thoughts, actions, and emotions. In other words, we all feel that I am a free agent. Okay, I am a free individual who can do what I want. Okay, at least to myself. Right? So there is a free will. We also are aware that we have a boundary that is distinct from the environment, and that is how we see what is our inner world and what is our external world. Okay, so this is what differentiates I from rest, I from you, I from rest of the environment, or in other words, I from the reality, or in other words, I from the real external world. Okay, fine. So these are some of the things which we don't ponder about it on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so if somebody is thinking about this on a day-to-day basis, they will be severely impaired in doing anything else, because then it becomes so incapacitating that this person will not be able to do any productive work. Okay, so but let me show you some examples from the patients. Okay, so most of these things are taken from one of my patient. Okay, who is a doctor by himself, who is a cardiac surgeon. Okay, so he mentions that it's my hand and arm which move, and my fingers pick up the pen, but I don't control them. I sit there watching them move, and they're quite independent. I'm just a puppet who is manipulated by cosmic strings. Okay, so the person has a conscious experience that I am not in control of my body. Okay, so I am not the author of my action. Okay, I am not having, if I am not a free agent in this. Okay, so this is not in a metaphorical sense which many religious people describe. Okay, that every action of mine is controlled by God. Okay, so it is more in a metaphorical sense, whereas here it is in a concrete sense that when I move my hand, I know that I am the one who moved my hand. Okay, whereas this person, what is experiencing is that the hand is not part of I. Okay, though I know that it is my body, I am not in control of my hand. Okay, we also see this in many neurological conditions, something which we call as phantom limb. Okay, so though there is nothing, we are many people with phantom limb experience several sensations. Okay, so they may not have the arm at all, but they do have the experience of the arm. Okay, and people have something called as alien limb syndrome, in which one of their hands starts moving and then does many activities which they are able to see, but at the same time not able to control. Okay, the difference between them and schizophrenia is that in those, they are aware, in the neurological condition, they are aware that they have a condition because of which it is behaving as if it is alien. Okay, whereas in schizophrenia, patients have an experience that it is truly has become alien. Okay, so my hand is not under my control at all. Okay, so it is controlled by someone else, is an experience that the patient is having. So we all think that when we feel, when we experience, it is me, and that experience is unique to me. Okay, but this person describes that I cry, tears roll down my cheeks, and I look unhappy. But it is not me who is unhappy, but they are projecting unhappiness onto my brain. Okay, because this person is a doctor, he uses the technical words, but otherwise, several patients will come and tell that they just project their unhappiness onto me, onto my mind. Okay, they make me sad. I don't want to feel sad, but they're not allowing me to be happy. Okay, so the person is no longer in control of the emotions. Okay, so it's not that I who is feeling, and the person also gives a description that I look out of the window and I think the garden looks nice, but then the thoughts of Andrews come to my mind. There are no other thoughts of mine there, only his. So the person is controlling the mind, not only the actions and the emotions, but also the thoughts. He treats my mind like a screen and flashes his thoughts onto it, like you flash a picture onto the screen. Okay. So he also gives a real life description that when I'm seeing parents of a child with heart defect from birth and explaining them the risk of surgery, aliens make me laugh. I know it's inappropriate, but I have no control over myself. So it is not a fragment of imagination. It is not under this person's will. It's embarrassing. I feel terrible. I feel like killing myself, but I am unable to do anything. Okay. So this is the inner world experience which the persons with several psychiatric conditions come up and tell, which makes you to doubt whether the description what we give as our own inner world experience is it accurate. Okay, so most of the time we don't ponder upon these things because we all have a sense of self. Okay, and that sense of self is complete. Okay, so we don't doubt when, and we don't have to check every day that whether my legs are there, whether my hands are there, whether my face is in the same position as it is. Okay. So our sense of self is most of the time a complete. Uh, so this gives us a false sense of hope that nothing has changed, while actually it has changed. Okay. So, and it is a reconstruction from our sensory organs that our body has created this image of self. Okay. So that is what happens when there is a brain damage. Okay. So when this reconstruction of our body image is lost, we see a lot of abnormalities. Okay. So this is when persons, when an individual has stroke. Okay. So there is a blood supply to the brain which is cut. So the brain, some parts of the brain is not working. Okay. So we get an unusual condition in one kind of a stroke called as Hemi Neglect. Okay. So you ask this person to draw a clock, the person ignores completely the left half. Okay. So not that this individual cannot see the left half, because there is a damage to one half of the brain, the individual completely neglects half of the world. Okay. And it is not only the external world, but it is also the internal world. Okay. So ask this individual to draw their own image. You can see at the bottom, this is the image an individual with Hemi Neglect has drawn, that the individual not only perceives half of the external world, but also half of the self. Okay. So the inner world, okay, our face is a manifestation of our inner world into this external world. Okay. So it is not only the demarcation or the destruction of the perception of external world, but also the internal world which is gone in clinical condition. So this again makes us to question, is our sense of self absolute? Okay. So if it is not absolute, is it just a fragment of, if not our conscious imagination, is it just a fragment of some other process, okay, which happens in the brain, same like we saw a conizer triangle? Is it our sense or our self experience is also something, a fragment of a process of the brain? Okay. So there's another condition called split brain, okay, so in which the two halves of the brain don't speak to each other, okay. So you show a picture to an individual, the person will say that I cannot see what is there in that, okay. So something similar to the Hemi Neglect person, that you show on the left side, for example, the person will say that I cannot see what is presented onto my left, but you give a written instruction on that page, he will actually follow that. So it is not in his conscious experience, but it is still sensed by his sense organ and then relate to the brain, and the brain has already processed, so that the individual can actually draw the picture which is presented to the left side, though it is not in his conscious experience. So these clinical conditions actually bring the question, is our sense of self real? Okay. So when we saw that what we see or what we perceive as an external world is not an absolute or accurate description of as it is, okay, it is not, is it the case with our internal world? Okay. So if is our sense of self real? Okay. So just hold that thought in your mind. But at the same time, we also have seen in our day-to-day experience that our sense of self-conscious experience is unique as an individual to me, how I experience. But at the same time, we all think that this kind of conscious experience is unique to human beings. Okay. So let me show you a video and then let us see what happens when a cat actually sees its own reflection. It also happens with several other animals. Okay. So you would have seen this with monkeys, you can see this with lions, elephants. Okay. At the same time, you show the reflection of a one's own image in the mirror. As early as a 2-year-old kid will be able to sense and will be able to recognize that it is me who is present in the mirror. Okay, so the kid will not be able to try to fight with its own image. Okay, whereas you see that very often in several animals. Okay, so is it something unique to human beings? Okay, so this requires a unique quality called as self-awareness. Okay, so our consciousness not only has to perceive the external world, but the conscious experience should also be able to see the inner world and bind this sense of self with the external world and delineate this sense of self with the external world. So that is what is deconstructed in several conditions. Okay, so yeah, so it's interesting, but let's move to the next one. Okay, so though animals don't have, few people believe that dolphins may have. Okay, chimpanzees are shown to have some elementary form of self-awareness. Okay, so few dolphins are shown to have an elementary form of self-awareness. Okay, but what the technology has done is that we are now having um, machines which may have some form of a self-awareness. Okay, so this is a very interesting experiment which happened a couple of years back. Okay, I'll show this video. Okay, so please pay careful attention to the video. Okay, I'll play it and then we could have a discussion on this. So primarily this is self-descriptive.
Which film did you receive?
Okay, I'll pause here. So primarily the experimenter asks, okay, which pill did you receive? Okay. So if the robot is programmed in such a way that if it has received a dumbing pill, it cannot speak. So the natural logical interpretation is if the robot is able to speak, then it has not received the dumbing pill. But there is no way in which the robot knows beforehand, before speaking, that whether it has received a dumbing pill or not. Okay. So that's the experiment here, that the robot is expected to speak first and then has to interpret the fact that because I am able to speak, I was not given a dumbing pill. So there is a self-awareness loop that I am able to speak and it is me who is speaking. That is why I have not received the dumbing pill. So that's what the robot does in the next few seconds.
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know. I was able to prove that I was not given the dumbing pill.
So initially it says I don't know, but then it is able to say that I was able to prove that I was not given the dumbing pill. Okay. So this experiment may look very silly to you. Okay. So there is no big tech involved. We know robots can do so many things. We know computers can do so many things. So what is the big deal in this? Okay. But this had defeated all computer science technicians and the wizards for at least 60 years, that they were not able to program this self-awareness. Okay. The reason is when a system is asked to explain logically its own self, the system collapses. So imagine you are in a pond and you are asked to give the description of the shape of the pond or description of the um, area of the pond, okay, or give an accurate description or realistic description of the pond. So you will not be able to give an accurate description of the pond as long as you are within the pond. To give an accurate description of the pond, you have to come out of the pond and then only you will be able to give an accurate description of the pond. Okay. So the problem in self-awareness is it becomes an infinite loop and it's very difficult to program. So this is something which was programmed very recently, but still, even if we are aware that our experience is not real and our experience may be unreal and it may be just our subjective experience, we still feel it as very real. Okay. So what makes us to feel our unique experience real? Okay. So if I show you some pictures which are abstract, each one of you who is seeing this picture may have different thoughts of arising because of the picture. Some of you may feel these pictures to be pleasing. Some of you may have some bad experiences coming to your mind. Some of you may feel that it may be some technical picture or an abstract picture and may have different thoughts. Not only the thoughts, but you may also get different emotions when you see pictures like this. So what makes your experience so feel real? Okay. So it is not that you don't think that it is just a picture, it has no meaning. You actually experience and you feel, okay, when you see an external stimulus, okay, and this is what is called as the hard problem of qualia. So our cognitive systems engage in information processing, but it doesn't end up there. It results in an experience. For example, the experience of seeing a deep blue sea. So it is not only the quality of the picture, but it is also an individual's experience. Experience comes not only from the current, but also from the past. If I had visited, for example, Maldives, and then had been to a beach which was similar to that, it may give me a very pleasing experience and recollect all the past memories. On the other hand, if any of you had an experience of tsunami, the sight of the same deep blue sea may actually bring about a bad memory and the experience may not be pleasant. Okay. So though we know that there is a reality in terms of objectivity, our reality is highly individualistic and it is a mixture of the inner world experience and the outer world experience. So there is a blend of the boundaries between our inner world and the outer world. In other words, there is a blend of the materialistic world and the mental world, which brings about this total experience that we as human beings are able to experience. And this is what is the conscious experience. Okay. So I spent half of my yesterday about dwelling about these things, what to present, how to bring about clarity to this. Then suddenly my wife called to help in kitchen. So all my wave function suddenly crystallized at that moment that we need something pragmatic, because otherwise my reality will be very bad. Okay. So though it is idealistic to dwell upon these things, to have something in the current or the present world from a pragmatic point of view, we need some trade-offs. Okay. While we know that we can't have an accurate description of external world, we can't have an accurate description of inner world, somewhere we need to find a trade-off, especially in clinical population, because we have people who have problematic description of both external world and problematic description of the internal world. Okay, so that is why a pragmatic compromise is required, and that is how the phenomenology comes into the picture. Okay, so that's why I thought it is better to blend both lectures into one. So though I had to cancel the previous lecture, so the boundaries of reality will have direct implication in clinical science. Okay, especially in treating psychiatric patients, and that is where we bring about the uh, process of phenomenology. Okay, so as psychiatrists, we deal with experience problems in experience of external world, abnormalities in experience of internal world, and not only that, there is also many times an experience which is abnormal in outer versus inner division. Okay, so you might have seen movies in which people have split personality, multiple personality. Okay, so I'm not the same person who I was yesterday. Okay, so it is not only the individual's um, uh, thoughts which change, but also the way the individual feels to the same stimulus will also change in multiple personality. Okay, so I am not the same person who was yesterday. Okay, I'm a different person today, which is not experienced by normal individuals. Okay, and in the same way, there are several abnormalities, like I described some of them in patients with schizophrenia, patients with severe depression, patients with bipolar disorder, okay, patients with neurological condition, that we know that their description of the internal or the external world may not be accurate. Okay, but we need to find a way in which we understand what they are describing, and then how we can help. Okay, but though it sounds logical, it has taken a long way. Okay, because we are trying to address some of these questions which are actually not scientific. They're not in the realms of science, because they have been traditionally addressed in the realms of philosophy. Okay? Because science as a discipline always looks at objective nature of the world, and it always thinks that it is independent of human beings, and physical structures obeys laws of nature, whereas something like mind may not obey the laws of nature. Okay, so the subjective nature of the problem, but we use objective nature of the techniques in medical science. For example, we are not able to devise any machine which can read our thoughts. Okay, so we can get a MRI to see our brain. We can get a MRI to see the blood flow in the brain. But till now, there is no device which can accurately give a description of what are the thoughts that I have, because it is a subjective in nature. But the technique that we are using, like MRI, is objective in its nature. Okay. So some of the challenges to apply the or address these subjective nature of the problem in medical science are, it requires a paradigm shift from objectivistic perspective to acknowledging that there could be subjective inaccuracies, and subjective experiences, as I mentioned, are not always accurate description of reality. So it's not that if a person is giving a description of their own problem, it is not that the description is an accurate description of reality. And there is could be a conflict between subjective reports and objective measures. So that is where the branch of the process of phenomenology becomes helpful, that it studies structures of conscious experience as experienced from the first person point of view. Okay. So it is one branch of philosophy which we have extensively borrowed in psychotherapy, that the phenomenological principles are very helpful in understanding and decoding the mind of the patient. So so we need a mid path between this tug of war, in which the philosophy believes that one cannot give an description of one's own experience because it is experiential and it is not descriptive, whereas neuroscience thinks that there is always something which is objective and there is nothing called subjective. Okay. So let us see it from a real life point of view. Okay. So this is one experiment which I have been describing for a couple of years. Okay. So this is our alien pizza problem. Okay. So imagine tomorrow morning a starship arrives and a bunch of aliens start moving around in Bangalore, and one of them sees what is pizza. Okay. So they go to a Domino's or Pizza Hut and then order a pizza. Okay. So the bystander is curious to see whether the alien also tastes pizza in the same way as I taste. Okay, so that's the question that a bystander who is standing next to this alien has, that what happens when the alien eats this pizza. Okay, so the alien, so if the bystander is a philosopher, according to our known entities, taste is a private experience. So whether a human being eating pizza experiences a taste in a similar way as the alien experiences or not cannot be known, because taste is a private experience, and what the experience the alien had cannot be accessed by the human, and at the same time what the experience human had cannot be accessed by the alien, because mental state is not accessible to another person. And because it is experiential, one cannot describe an experience. So to experience taste, one must taste. So the only way we get to know whether alien will be able to taste pizza or not is only if the alien is able to eat that pizza. Even if the alien eats the pizza, we will never be able to know whether the experience that the alien had is same as the experience that a human had eating the same pizza. Okay, so that is the first person extreme, that no two individuals can have the same experience, and because it is experiential, it cannot be described. So there is no way of you knowing whether the experience is the same or different between two individuals. Okay. Whereas the neuroscience looks at it from the other extreme, because we think that it is intersubjectively accessible state. Okay. So mental state of other person can nevertheless be indirectly recognized. Okay. So the person may say that I will examine a neuroscientist bystander who is standing will say that, okay, by looking at the facial expression of the alien and the human, I will be able to tell whether they both experience same kind of an experience or not. Okay. Or in other words, whether they both like pizza or not, I will be able to tell. And if I measure their pulse rate, okay, if both of them like, the pulse rate has to increase. Okay, because it is a pleasurable experience. Or if both of them don't like, in a similar way, the pulse rate has to increase in a similar way. Okay, so this is the another extreme of a neuroscientist, that a description of the mental state is indirect, but it is not impossible. Okay, but both these extreme views are not useful in clinical practice. Okay, so I cannot say to my patient who comes with depression and tells that I'm feeling terrible, I cannot say that the amount of terribleness that you are feeling is the same as the amount of terribleness that another person X is feeling. So you both are equal, so you both are same, you don't have to worry. Okay, so it simply feels ridiculous if I give that explanation. On the other hand, if I give a first person explanation that I have no means in which I can get to know how you are feeling, so there is no point in discussing that because it is your experience, only you will know. So that is the terrible description if I give it from the first person point of view or from the philosophy point of view. So what we need is a midway. Okay, so what is applied in therapy is not the third person as in the neuroscience, not the first person as in the philosophy or in the phenomenology. Okay, it's the application of the phenomenology in the second person perspective. Okay, so in other words, so it's the nexus between private experience and public communication. So it is the intrasubjective communication, that is not only what I taste. Okay, so that is the first person experience from the phenomenology, that we ask them to distance themselves and then give a description of their own experience. Okay, so for example, instead of just telling I like this pizza, I like the taste of the pizza. So a person who is trained in the psychotherapy using phenomenological principles will be able to distance themselves and then say that I recognize that I taste the spice in pizza, and it is this spice which is giving me the pleasure. Okay. So here the person is stepping out of this experiential zone. Okay. So in other words, from the subjective experience, they are distancing themselves and trying to give an objective description. So at the same time, it is not completely objective like a third person neuroscience point of view. It is a second person because it is still I who is giving this description. Okay, and when we do this, the person is still having the feeling of taste, but not as pure as the experience of the taste. Okay, fine. So what is applied in phenomenology is an intrasubjective relation to themselves. Okay. So the person is asked to experience, but at the same time distance themselves, relate to the self as an object. Okay, so you distance between yourself and your description, and then you will be able to consider your own mental state from new points of view. Okay. So as long as we are having an experiential view, we will not be able to get out of that point of view. So for example, I am feeling terrible because somebody scolded me. I will never be able to distance myself and walk in their shoe as long as I am feeling terrible. Okay. So to do that, I will have to distance myself from these emotions and then walk in somebody else's shoe to get to know why that other person scolded me. Okay. So this is what is applied from the phenomenological point of view, that we ask them to give a description and then in the first person, but this first person perspective is changed to the second person perspective, and when the subjective self distances to the object as an objective self, the person is able to look at this from a new point of view. Not only from new point of view, it also takes out a lot of emotional tone which is associated. Okay, or in other words, the feeling associated with the experience. While first person perspective and third person perspective are its extreme ends, the phenomenological based psychotherapy takes a mid ground so that a pragmatic description of this both inner world and the external world reality is given. Okay, so we also have to make a compromise there, that we know that it's an inaccurate description, but unless the person is able to give that description, we will never be able to get to know what is going through in this person's mind. Okay, so this is the second person perspective which the phenomenological perspective takes, because both our inner and the external world boundaries are not very clear to examine either in the first person or in the third person. Okay. So to summarize, our conscious experience is private, but private experiences can still be communicated. Private experiences can be measured, though indirectly. So we do know that our experience of external world is not always accurate, but our experience of inner world is also not always accurate. So phenomenology-based techniques have helped to understand inner world abnormalities in psychiatry, and they may actually also help us to understand how we perceive our external world. So objectively measuring subjective nature of experience is a major challenge for science, and I do hope that experience of self and others which are so fundamental and will be understood only when they are absent. Okay, this understanding will help one to understand the boundaries between the external and the internal world, which ultimately may give us a better understanding of what we consider as an absolute reality. So, thank you for your patient listening. I do know that I have given more doubts than actually answers, and if I had answers, I would have given. Not only that, I would have got a Nobel Prize, I feel. Okay. So it's the plain fact that nobody knows these absolute answers. So if I am able to give and create more doubts and make you more confused than earlier, I consider myself more successful, and welcome to the club of confusion and of what is reality. So I'll be happy to take if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, sir. And you ended on the note, if you have more questions, I see several questions, and we will now take them one by one. As always, please do raise your hand if you have any questions with the raise hand function. It will be nice to see all of you if you switch on your videos. So I do see one hand up, and I'll ask him to first ask this question. Go ahead, Varun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor, for this illuminating lecture. My question is specifically regarding metaphysical idealism. You did talk about the reality and how it might be seen, as constructed in some sense. So, what is your take on recent advancement in cognitive science by the likes of Donald Hoffman, who says that reality is reality sort of an illusion, which is basically evolutionary theory shows us that how we can adapt to the fitness of a species rather than showing what real is. So he goes into the domain of metaphysical idealism with a specific recent book that is Case Against Reality, How Evolution Hide the Truth. So how do you see such stances coming from cognitive psychology? Do you think they can, face the empirical sort of they can face empirical reality? How do you see such stance?
Yeah. See, see, at present there are several theories. Which one of them is right is the time is what is going to tell. At least our understanding of the time currently, because um, um, there is whether there is something like an empirical reality is the major question. Okay, so are we dealing a singular reality or do we have multiple realities? And then at different time points or at different realms we have different realities. Okay, so at present I don't have uh, any definitive answer on how it will impact on the cognitive neuroscience from the evolutionary perspective, like you are mentioning. Okay, but it will be interesting to see. Okay, so there are several attempts on from different disciplines. Okay, um, yes, I don't have a specific answer to this because I haven't read the theory that you are mentioning and how it is going to have a direct impact on the cognitive neuroscience. But empirical reality, the word that you used, is what caught my attention. That whether reality is empirical, or in other words, it's absolute or not, is the question.
Thank you, sir. I see another hand up. Kanchan, please go ahead.
First question is that from the famous statement of Jiddu Krishnamurti that observer is the observed. So how do you explain it from the psychoanalysis point of view? And my second question, not as any specialized branch, but as a layman, phenomenology, is it, how can I define it as a reality the way I perceive it?
Yeah. So in a constructive sense, you can define it as your subjective reality. So because the reality that you perceive, it may be very different from the reality that the other person perceives. Okay. So in other words, from the phenomenological point of view, it is your subjective reality. Okay. So this is the way I see things. Okay. This is the way I experience. This is the way things are for me. Okay. But in a pure subjective reality, what happens is the person will not be able to see the other reality which the other person is experiencing. That's what we see in clinical conditions. So if you are aware of the fact that the subjective realities are individualistic, okay, then it is what phenomenology in the layman perspective. Okay. Whether the observer is the observer. Can you just tell?
No, the observer is the observed.
Observer is the observed. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So that's what the one human chain that I was showing. Okay. Is there something beyond the human conscious experience? Okay. So are we also in a huge experiment in which we are being observed? Okay. And and there are several scientific theories which have been put forth, like whether the whole experience of human experience is a simulation. Okay. So there are theories which have claimed, and famous personalities like Elon Musk and others have claimed that whatever is our life is nothing but a huge computer simulation of cosmos grade. Okay. So whether the observer is the observed, from the metaphorical or the metaphysical, yes. Okay. But not only from that point of view, there are people who do think that the human conscious experience is also something which can be observed. Okay. But from the clinical point of view, like I was telling, okay, or from the psychoanalysis, because you brought that up, okay. So the observer or the therapist, okay, cannot be objective. Okay. So the person who interprets the another person also interprets based on their own subjective experiences or the subjective training. Okay. So the classical psychoanalysis do have groups in which the therapist also undergoes the therapy to have better insights into their own minds. Okay. So in that way, the observer will be observed even in the psychodynamic or the psychoanalytic point of view.
Okay, thank you, sir. I saw that Ria had her hand up. Ria, do you still have a question? Okay.
Good evening, sir. My question is, in terms of, like philosophically, scientifically, you seem to have really explained us the logic of psychotherapy, that why it works and what is the pragmatic solution, what is the trade-off it is offering between these two ways of, looking about abnormality. So we've seemed to find the solution of what we can do. But my question to you is that what do you think about the mental health awareness discourse? Because as we understand, most of the clinical population is in terms of, like personality disorders, we say it is egosyntonic, that insight is not there, and there is resistance to treatment, and there is a reactive stance towards authority figures like a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. So if in terms of the clinical population, if family or other people are acting on behalf of that person to forcing them into treatment as part of mental health awareness, how do you think, how do you think about mental health awareness discourse in that sense? How can we make it more positive for the clinical population themselves?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So this is a day and night problem for us. Okay. So if the majority of the patients who have psychiatric conditions do not accept that they have psychiatric condition. Okay. So like I was mentioning in the previous question, okay, as long as an individual is aware that their subjective reality is not the same between individuals, okay, there is no problem. Okay. So I am fine to have my own experience. But in several psychiatric conditions who do not have this insight, the major problem is that the person is not able to understand that the reality what they are experiencing is subjective and not objective. Okay, so this subjective reality what the person is experiencing is thought that it is an objective phenomena by the individual. That is when the insight is lost. Okay, that if I am seeing this external person or if I am hearing this external voice, okay, so the person thinks that that external voice is real. Okay, so for a third party it is hallucination. Okay, but for the individual that external voice is absolutely real. Okay, so that is where the person is not able to distance from their own self experience and look at it from a second person or from a third person point of view. So the whole agenda in the psychotherapy will be to make them distance from their self experience and then to look at their experience from an outside point of view. Okay, so it need not be a completely third person, but it could be at least from a second person point of view. Okay, or at least let them give a description from a second person perspective so that they will be able to see the inaccuracies in their own description. So from the first person or from a pure subjective reality point, if a person can make a trade off and come to a stance which is a mid path, okay, then that will definitely help them. And the families are also educated or at least um trained to do this to some extent. Okay, so a common pragmatic solution, for example, is when a person has a belief that somebody is going to kill me. Okay, the logical thing the family does is they try to dispute, they try to logically discuss with the individual, talk it over so that we can convince this person that there is nothing like somebody is going to kill him, or there is no voice that others are able to hear. Okay, so as part of the psychoeducation, we do train them. We first explain them that the subjective reality is highly individualistic. Okay, so because you are all from philosophy and different disciplines who are interested in the self-conscious experiences, it may not sound alien to you, but believe me, when we tell this to several individuals, the concept is very alien to them. Okay, so it takes a lot of effort to actually tell them that there is the experience what an individual has is highly subjective. Okay, so the first step is to make the family aware that there is subjective individualistic experience, and then to tell them how the subjective experience could be inaccurate and how the subjective experience could arise because of the illness. Okay. And if we are able to do that, that will help the families to understand the illness, and gradually over the course of therapy, once the patient is able to understand that, that will help them to get reintegrated into the family.
I see a question from Upendra. Yeah, please go ahead.
So for me, regarding hallucination and imaginative thinking, and then about the purposeful observation, because as an actor, we push the participants to go to beyond the reality, but not to the hallucination. But what is the exact bifurcating line is a very important for us. But when we speak of reality, he cannot come into the the role of a creator or an actor or imaginative thinking, number one. And then regarding observation, I want to find out a different place rather than first, second, third person, because a purposeful observation makes us to create an imaginative character on stage. So as you said, the third point, I'll complete my question. That is, I hear a sound, I hear a call, and that happens for every actor. But what is that makes an actor not to fall into this philosophical kind of thing or to the hallucination thing, and how he stands in between? And what is that your position in the take of an actor?
Okay. So, okay, if I can give you a collective answer. So, what differentiates highly creative individuals from patients who have psychiatric condition? This has been a major debate which is always there. And how you differentiate momentary changes in our conscious state from abnormal conscious states as seen in psychiatric conditions. So, for example, the description that you gave, like you as an actor, you will have to have different kind of a perception, and it could be purposeful. So let me give an example. For example, Picasso, when he was painting, there were many instances in which he has described that as if the time froze. Okay. So his sense of time actually froze when he was painting. And it is something which has been described by several individuals that as if they lose control of their own self, something else was just guiding them to complete the task. Okay. So it is given by soldiers, it is given by actors, it is given by athletes, it is given by sports people, it is given by several other individuals, including highly creative individuals. So there is something like a self-induced altered state of consciousness. Okay. So which many people who practice different kinds of meditation also attain a kind of altered state of consciousness in which their sense of reality will change. Okay. So compared to somebody, the same person when he is not meditating and when he is meditating or she is meditating, so the sense of reality is very different in these two different states. Okay. So at the same time, it is volitional. Okay. So what differentiates an actor reaching a position in which the person is able to act in that particular role, okay, as if this person has embodied that, versus somebody who believes that this person has changed into another, is whether the intention was purposeful or not, first. Second thing is, or in other words, I bring about that there is a sense of agency. Okay. So I induce this onto myself to reach a different level of consciousness. And the second thing, it will also be at the will of the individual to terminate that experience. So the actor will be able to terminate that experience and get back to his role after the play. So there is a control over getting into that state and getting out of that state, and the state is transient. There could be instances in which it has come without the person is trying to do, but the state will always be transient. State is never permanent. Okay. Whereas in psychiatric condition, the abnormalities, the state is not transient. The state is more like consistent. So I won't use the word permanent because there are several treatments to reverse that. But at the same time, it is not under the will of the individual to come out of that. Okay. So in most of the other instances, though they may get into that state automatically, okay, or without any conscious effort, they will be able to come out of that. So for example, the actor, painter, any other creative individual, even though they have gotten into that state, it will be transient, and after a while they will be able to come out of that volitionally. Whereas in a patient, the patient cannot come out of that volitionally. Okay. So I guess it has at least partly answered some of your questions.
So what is the precaution we have to take, sir? Because is there any?
No.
Because we have seen number of actors who have fallen into that prey and they have actually lost their life itself. And I have been very serious and very sincere to guide some of the actors to, any cues from your side for that?
See, so as a rule in medical science, okay, one golden rule is, if the false negativity is high, don't scream. Okay. In other words, not all actors who have this will get into abnormality. Okay. So it is not required for every individual who gets into a creative mode to worry that I will become a psychiatric patient. Okay. There will be a subgroup who will have this experience. One important sign to look for is whether this experience is remaining longer than what it was required, longer than what it was useful. Okay. So for example, if the person is continuing in the same state even after the required amount of time, the play is over, but the person is still continuing in that, okay, or it is happening frequently, that's the time they may have to look for whether there is something. Okay, but at the same time, I'm telling that not all creative people will become patients with psychiatric condition. It's very, very small proportion. It may not be higher than the general population. Okay, so people have examined whether creativity and psychiatry go together, and no. Okay. So at least you can be consider yourself safe that in most of the instances people will not develop any abnormality. But if you observe anything which is going beyond its what is considered normalcy in your peer group, you may have to seek a consultation to first see whether it is something which requires an intervention or not.
There are many questions in the chat box. If there are any other questions that people would wish to raise, please do raise your hands. So I'll just read out some of the questions, sir, and you can just choose whichever. One is, are you saying that there is reality beyond sense perception?
I'm not saying there is reality beyond sense perception. What I am telling is you cannot deduce reality from your sensation or perception. So what you consider as reality through your sense organs may not be accurate description of the reality itself. Okay. So for example, I am sitting on a red color chair. You see a red color chair behind me. Okay. So I show the same red color chair to my cat. It will see it as black and white because there is no color perception required hardware in its eyes. Okay. So the cat may have only black and white perception, not color perception. So does that mean that the chair has no color, or does the chair has any color? Okay, so if that is the question, like, is there anything like an absolute color of this chair? So the same redness that I see, okay, may be seen as a different color. So if there is a person who is color blind, for him the chair is not red, the chair may be blue. Okay. So what I am trying to tell is the chair by itself may not have any color. So when you see, it is the interaction between your sensation and the perception that you get, which brings about the color to this chair. Okay. So it's not beyond, it is the way you perceive itself is creating an illusory reality to you, is what I'm telling.
Another question, sir. How do we look at poetry, literature, drama, movies? Very broad question, but yeah.
So how do we look at poetry, literature, drama, movies? Yeah. Okay. See, so the imagination is an internal mental world activity, and all these things are an inner mental world activity that is projected into an external world. So as long as the boundaries between the inner world and the external world are not blurred, the person will be productive. Okay. So the problem comes when the boundaries between the inner mental world and the external world gets very blurred. Okay. So in general, it is not very clear, but at least we make some kind of a compromise, and then we reach a compromise in which we have delineated ourselves that I am different from this external world. When that boundary is lost, then it is a problem. So as such, imagination, creativity is not a problem. Okay. That is the productivity.
So there's another question. Is it possible that by continuous or frequent use of the second person perspective, it leads to or triggers personality disorders or distortion of reality, as the person might start losing the boundary between first and second person experience?
So I do have seen several patients who have had this experience. Okay. So we don't know whether the individual started this second person perspective intentionally, or the second person perspective also happened automatically. Okay. So I and several other psychiatrists, and it is well documented that in the initial stages of the onset of a psychiatric condition, people do describe many times a distancing from their own self. Okay. So we don't know whether it is an intentional exercise which resulted in this psychiatric condition, or whether a same cause which was about to result in a psychiatric condition in its earlier stages resulted in this second person perspective. But at the same time, it is always not advisable to continuously ponder over from the second person perspective, because you lose your emotional tone if you continuously use second person. That's the reason we use it in therapy when somebody is having a very highly emotionally traumatizing event, for example. We try to use a second person perspective. But if you are using it frequently, then you are not able to experience a first person. Then the whole world will start looking unreal because you are not having a first person experiential account. And that could actually result in several difficulties, including personality disorders.
Last couple of questions, sir. One, shouldn't there be an element of authenticity or objectiveness even in subjective experience? Because otherwise, the whole core of the experience itself is lost.
True, but what is this objectivity in the subjective experience is the whole question. So like I was trying to tell, how do you measure objective, or how do you define objective? So the definition of reality was supposed to take care that in a layman term, what is reality is what is objective. But as we have seen over the course that there is nothing like an absolute objectivity, because what we considered as objective all this along is also interacting with the subjective experience. So 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 I don't know whether um, uh, we have any definitive means of knowing an absolute objectivity for the experience. Okay, so it's highly controversial. At present, I don't think there is anything like that. At least that is my stance at present, that there is nothing like an objectivity in experience, because the experience is highly subjective and we may not have anything as an absolute objectivity.
Okay, and the last question for today, Ria, I request you to make it brief and we'll conclude with this question.
Yes. So one thing came to me that because it seems like this externalizing of the problem outside the individual in terms of a disease model, that it's not you, it is a disease, seems important to the whole work of psychotherapy. So I'm thinking this is present day science, right? We've turned it into a disease model and we've got a cure. We've got a professional who can hack that intersubjective process. That is what you're saying we have to do at the level of family also. That it is not about sort of logically telling them that, okay, it's not how you think, this, that, but sort of trying to play that intersubjective game in a different way, in an abnormal self-experience. So would you think that, like faith healers and people who think that mental illnesses are works of spirits have actually traditionally been the people managing mental illness so far, because they have provided that cultural space for abnormality to be recognized in an intersubjective sort of a reality?
True, definitely, I don't disagree with that at all. So it's only in the last maybe 200 years that people think problems of the mind are in the realms of, are within the boundaries, or medicine can play a role in that. All along in human civilization, the problems of the mind was in the domains of religiosity, okay, so our philosophy, our theology. So it's not. It's only recently that we have started to examine this in the domain of science. Okay. So several of the techniques that are used in psychotherapy are heavily borrowed from what has been practiced by different religious groups. Okay. So though the some of the things that you mentioned, like faith healers and the spirits, may have a negative connotation, many of them actually gave a channel to vent out their frustration, vent out the inner conflicts. And many times the shamans were also using what we recently use as medicines in many of their ritualistic practices so that they can bring about these experiences in a vivid way. So the other part which is not having so much of negative connotation, which is heavily borrowed, is also some of the religious practices like in the Buddhist tradition. So for example, mindfulness-based psychotherapy is nothing new. It is almost entirely borrowed from the Buddhist tradition and then packaged into something which is palatable to Western population. So, so the religious practices or the knowledge is actually put into practice even by the scientific people. So I don't see any problem in accepting or agreeing with you that yes, several of these things, but at the same time, there were always black sheep in that profession also, okay, from time along. So that's where the social responsibility comes of where to put a line of demarcation that this is not acceptable and this is acceptable. Okay. So not everything is bad, but at the same time, we have to remember that some of these religious practices are the practices by the faith healers are actually more traumatizing to patients than the disease itself. So that's where we need to differentiate.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any other questions. I think a lot of people are very appreciative of the lecture and very happy to have listened to you today, sir. So, without further ado, I will quickly deliver a vote of thanks. Um, Thank you, first of all, to Dr. Naren, as I said in the beginning, for taking. I see another question, but I think we are out of time. Sir, would you like to answer one last question?
Yeah, maybe the last one, because I also have to rush.
Okay, fine. Alternatively, you could maybe just ask the question and you could answer it later, sir. There's no issue about that.
I'll just take this last one.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead, Mr. Sailesh. I've unmuted you.
Yeah, so it's just meant that my hand got raised just by mistake. Otherwise, it was a wonderful session. Thanks a ton.
So thanks a lot, Dr. Naren, for taking the time off an extremely busy schedule and giving us this wonderful lecture and giving us this opportunity to interact with you. As one of the organizers and also as part of NIAS, we're extremely grateful to you for this time and for your lecture. So thanks a lot, sir. I would also like to thank our Dean and Head of the Consciousness Studies Program, Professor Sangeeta Menon, for facilitating this, for conceptualizing this, and for making this happen. Thank you to her. I'd like to specifically thank other members of my team. I'd like to thank Niharika, Ashwini, Abhishek, Meera, and everybody else for the invaluable work that has been happening in the background, managing the Zoom platforms, and a lot of other work that happens just so these sessions can happen. So thank you all. And of course, thanks to NIAS for providing this platform. And thank you all for attending every session. We look forward to having you back for the last 2 sessions next week and the week after. So thank you all and see you next week.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.